Welcome to the Twin Bill Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bolohan. All right, I know what you're thinking. Yet another novella about 19th century semi-pro Canadian baseball. All joking aside, Andrew Forbes is one of today's greatest baseball writers. After releasing 2 books of baseball essays, he turns to fiction for McCurdle's Arm, which follows Robert James McCurdle, an aging pitcher, as he fights to continue playing in the rough and tumble early days of baseball. It's beautifully written and really sparked my interest in 19th century baseball. I hope you enjoy.
Am I right about this? The last guest was Lance Parrish?
Yeah, you're following Lance Parrish right now. I was pretty excited about Lance Parrish. I'm not going to lie.
That's good. That's great. Holy cow.
Growing up a Tiger fan, he's just like such a household name for me. Just the nicest guy. I live in New York now, so I was at a Yankee game. And I get an email, and it's from Lance Parrish. And I show my buddy, like, Lance Parrish just emailed me. And it's like, what is happening to my life? It is so funny.
No kidding.
Well, Andrew, welcome to the podcast. This is such a joy to have you on here. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about it.
So before we talk about the book, I want to talk about the cover art, which I absolutely love. It's such a striking cover. What is the story behind that image? It's great.
Yeah, we went through a few iterations of covers. First of all, I'm very fortunate to be publishing once again with the great Invisible Publishing, small Canadian indie publisher. And the process for cover design with Invisible is a very collaborative one. Megan Fields is the designer, and you know, as an author, you get a lot of input, which I know is not the norm in book publishing. So I'm grateful for that. But this wasn't one of her original designs. This was kind of a placeholder or an image that was being used as an announcement about the book, because the book really briefly is kind of being squeezed in. I'm publishing a novel in the fall, but this was a book that I wrote very quickly and was very excited about, and my publisher was happy enough to humor me and in publishing it quick, sort of like a year post to post.
Oh, wow.
From when I sat down to write it till when it came out, just about maybe 13 months. But anyway, so Megan whipped up an announcement graphic using this image that was, I think it's like a pocket schedule for, I want to say, the 1888 New York Giants.
Oh, wow.
So old enough that it's in the public domain and can be used and fiddled with, and just a gorgeous image. So I think that's the original Polo Ground.
Yeah.
That you're seeing in the background of that image. And then Megan, once we settled on, I was like, what? Can we just use this? Like, can this be made into a cover? And she was like, yeah, it looks great. And she went back in and she did little things like one of the teams depicted in that image is now wearing uniforms that line up with my description of the home team's uniforms in the book and things like that. So yeah, it's gorgeous, and I couldn't be more thrilled with it. But every book she's designed for me. This is my fifth book I think she's designed, and they're always gorgeous. She's just knocked it out of the park every time. If you'll forgive the pun.
So you said this started essentially 13 months ago or so. Where did this idea begin for you?
It you know, when you have like a whole bunch of research in your head and it's just kind of spilling over. So excuse me, I was under contract for this novel that's coming out in the fall, and I was also writing. I'm still writing another nonfiction book about baseball, which is about kind of the angle of that one is kind of baseball and labor and the history of baseball players as laborers. And so basically, between rounds of edits, I had handed off a round of edits to my editor in the novel. I was due to get back to the nonfiction research and writing for this new book, which is called Fieldwork. Comes out next spring. But I thought, like, it had been a while since I just kind of gave myself free rein to write something without you know, like something that wasn't under contract or anything. And so I just opened up a blank page, and this, you know, I think because there was this surfeit of like all this information, all this reading I'd done, great information about 19th century baseball. It just kind of took off, and I literally wrote that. It's short, and I realized early on that what I was doing was writing a novella, which is a form that I love and wanted to write. But I very quickly realized that I had the whole story, I had the character, I had the voice, and so I wrote that roughly 100-page book in 3 weeks.
Oh, you're kidding!
And it came out like pretty much done, which is rare for me, right? I recognize revision as part of the process of writing. This one didn't need a lot, and I could kind of feel that. It was me opening up a blank document, giving myself permission to kind of break some rules that I usually hold, and not research stuff. There was a little bit of research involved in terms of like words in use or not in use because it takes place in 1892. Transportation technology, things like that, little things that I could just quickly look up on Wikipedia or something. But for the most part, it was just kind of drop in and go, which was a lot of fun.
So what is your background with 19th century? That is something that I personally do not know a whole lot about, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to even say that I didn't realize that there was a whole lot of baseball happening in Canada, Western Ontario, in the 19th century. When did you begin researching this, and what is your background in this?
Well, I mean, baseball research is something I've been doing for a number of years, but the 19th century stuff just became more and more interesting to me because it kind of sits at that boundary of like what we know and what remains mysterious and probably forever will, and doing research into subjects that reach back into the 19th century, like issues of baseball labor relations and players' rights and just the history of the birth of the game and the more that we learn about the fallacy of the whole Abner Doubleday story and what actually happened. So there are some excellent books. The fact is that I stand on the shoulders of giants when it comes to like John Thorne and his book Baseball in the Garden of Eden, which is just a phenomenal work exploring the roots of the game. Edward Acorn's 59 and 84 about old Hoss Radbourne's amazing season in 1884. There's the Beer and Whiskey League by David Nemec. Like, just fantastic books that are so like it makes the game feel like the Wild West back then. Before things were as codified as they are now, before things were as homogenized and corporatized as they've become, and it was a game full of characters and scoundrels and change. Right, the game was still finding its footing and evolving and becoming what we recognize now. And I just leaned into what became interesting to me. And in terms of the second part of your question, in Canada, I will have you know, and all listeners know, that baseball has been the summer game in Canada for better than 150 years. Like it's got very established roots, especially in places proximate to the border, like southwestern Ontario. But there are newspaper accounts of games that look like baseball going back to the 1830s, quite literally. Wow. in Ontario. So it's the lake isn't always frozen. We're not always playing hockey, right? So yeah, people have played baseball passionately and for a long time here.
That's great. As I'm reading the book, I did get this kind of Western kind of feel, like a Deadwood sort of vibe to it. Yeah. It's great. It's in it. You mentioned the Wild West, and it really does have this kind of anything kind of goes, and it's not today's game. It's not today's game, and that is, I think, part of the appeal to it. These characters are much. Yeah, they're real people, it seems like, and they're not these sort of reserved people you see playing the game today, these millionaires who... It's a different world.
It is. And, when the game first developed and spread, specifically in the United States, it was conceived of as a gentleman's game, very much like cricket, right? It was competing with cricket for the attention of American sports people. But as it aged, it very much became something that respectable people probably didn't do, right? If you told your parents you wanted to be a ball player, they probably discouraged you from doing it. It was boozy and brawling and disorganized and rough, and that makes it really fun to write about.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Yeah.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your first baseball work of fiction, is that right?
Yeah, there's a little one-pager short story in my first collection of short fiction, but for the most part, I've kind of avoided short fiction with the understanding that, this is probably true of all subgenres, but when it's poorly done, it's really poorly done. And I didn't want to, and also kind of probably resisting my dad, who was always like, "What? You should write a baseball novel." And I was like, "No, Dad, no, that's," because there are some great ones, and they are, they form, the background of the writer that I am now, but I also didn't want to screw it up. I was a little afraid of it. So this one happened so fast that I didn't have time to think about it, I think. And the fact that it takes place in the 1890s makes it a little bit different. So in one fell swoop, I was never going to write historical fiction, and I was never going to write sports fiction. So instead I combined them and wrote this.
It's funny talking to fiction writers who have written about baseball. They're always like, yeah, didn't want to. It's like, is this thing I did always want to do it, but I was like, everyone said like, no, it's like, it's a bad idea. No one wants this weird genre thing. And then they do it, and they're all really happy they did it in the end. And it's been great. I mean, and I think we've published, I don't know, 50, 60 short stories over the years, and there's frankly varying quality to them. I'm not going to lie.
Sure.
It is a very difficult thing to do. Were there any specific challenges that you felt writing baseball fiction?
Just getting it right. I mean, specific to this one was making sure that I had things like the rules and conventions right for the time. And I actually had a pretty distinguished Canadian baseball researcher read it. A guy named Bill Humber, who's written a number of books about the history of the game, and was sort of right there at the ground floor of the founding of SABR, Society for American Baseball Research. I feel like I had to be careful to make sure I wasn't writing a book just for hardcore baseball researchers, right? That's something that stood narratively as something that somebody who's not a baseball fan could read and enjoy. And I think that's the line that you tread. It's like too much inside baseball, you alienate a large group of readers, but not enough. And the hardcore baseball researchers, the seam heads, are going to balk at it. So it's a difficult balance, I think.
I want to talk about Robert James McCurdle. He is a very interesting character. And you said he basically came fully formed, more or less?
Yeah. So the book has got like an interesting voice that I employ in it, which is not something that I've used. It's not one that I've used before. And it all came kind of at once. This voice describing this character. The voice is like a close third. It's not even. It's like it's outside of McCurdle. It's not McCurdle. It's an unnamed other party. But this party somehow has sort of access to McCurdle's interiority. But specifically that voice describing this character came to me, kind of in the proverbial bolt of lightning. And there wasn't much else that needed to be decided. I kind of understood that he was a bit of a gruff man, a bit romantic, kind of, morally ambiguous. Like he's not the most, he's not a white-hatted cowboy. He's just kind of a man living within his circumstances. And somehow it was just the details that needed to be worked out from there. But who he was pretty clear to me early on. What he was somebody who was at that very delicate precipice of understanding that his body was not going to let him do what he wanted to do forever, and that decisions were going to have to be made, and either he was going to make them or they were going to be made for him.
Which I think is, I mean, I've had Tommy John. I just tore my labrum, and I am still trying to go. I loved seeing that in a character from 130 years ago. The same thing that I'm going through today. Yeah. It's this very relatable trait, and especially without the miracles of medicine today and what that looks like.
Right.
He really is a fascinating, relatable guy. A very human guy, which I appreciated.
I think that what he represents for me is an embodiment of that, the essence really of what baseball is, right? Like, I think it was Joe Posnanski, somebody said that, baseball is never as beautiful as when you're 10 years old or 12 years old or something. And I think that the appeal of the game as I get older is that it allows me to be in touch with childhood in a way, right? That a lot of other distractions don't. I mean, the story of McCurdle is the story of the game, is the story of life beyond baseball. It's reckoning with time, right? And how to recognize when the signs are clear that something needs to change.
You talk about childhood there. I was on your Instagram the other day. You coach Little League now, right?
I am an assistant coach, which I will tell you is the ideal situation because you have less responsibility, but you get to put on the uniform and catch bullpen sessions and yell baseball stuff and chew seeds and yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah,
it's interesting because I was thinking about this, and maybe this is a leap, but I find almost more in common between McCurdle's time and Little League than I do with. You take the brawling and the the violence and the drinking and all that stuff.
Oh, I don't know. But, well, maybe not the
drinking. Well, so maybe. But compared to the major leagues, the the little league, the tournaments, the travel, they're just trying to keep going. And I think that this is a thing that I didn't realize playing little league, and maybe this starts from the day you start playing baseball. You're just trying to play as long as you can. You don't realize it all the time, but that's the goal, is just to try to keep going as long as you can. And that is kind of the goal always at the end of the day. Did you gain anything, or did you have any inspiration from your experience coaching Little League with this?
That's a good question. Maybe, but I think if so, I think it was in what you hinted there in the beginning, which is that it gets you up close and personal with a form of the game which is a little less polished, a little rougher around the edges, has a little less sheen to it, right? The Major League game is great, but it's packaged HD entertainment at this point, even when you're in the stadium. It's nice to be down there at ground level, getting dirty, even after a practice. Like, I'm not a player, I'm a coach. I stand there for the most part. I hit fungo. But I come home and, and I'm dirty head to toe, right? There's no way around it. We're playing on dusty fields. And that, I think that informed the writing of this book a little bit. It kind of seeds in your teeth, dirt on your ankles, and sweat on your cap. Like, it feels a little more real. I think that might have been part of it for sure, because I was deep into the coaching at the time that I was writing it.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was a kid, I had a tournament in Mississauga, and we got wrecked. We got destroyed. And it is just, I think that might have been the first time when I went somewhere and played and realized that, there's better people out there than just my suburban Michigan people out there. And I think that is, again, that is a story of baseball throughout life, even in McCurdle's case, where it's like, right, maybe I'm not suited anymore.
It's about recognizing limitations. Some of them you can control, and some of them you can't, right? Like, so this year, our team is 14 years old. And 14 years old is an interesting age, because you'll roll into a tournament and there will be guys who look like they're still boys, and there will be guys who you're tempted to ask for their ID, right? Like, and you can't teach that stuff, right? You can drill your guys as much as you want and do as much VP and infield practice and all that stuff, but you cannot make up for the gap when somebody is physically developed like a man and the guy pitching to him isn't.
Yeah.
So it bumps you right up against the kind of the biological limits of who you are as a person. It can be eye opening for sure.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of take a step back here. You mentioned you kind of wrote this in between your novel, which is coming out later, I believe, the fall. Is that correct? In the fall?
Yeah, October.
Yeah.
October.
How did the writing experience compare? I know you wrote this very quickly.
The novel was complete, but we were doing rounds of edits. So I had completed. I'd gone through, my editor's suggestions and had turned it back to him to look over. So I had a little bit of a breathing space from that book for whatever, month or something. And the novel, I think, all told, I began writing the novel in August of 2020, and actually that project began as the idea in my head there. I've always loved novellas as a form. I just love the novella, the length of it, the weight that can be packed into it, how it's distinct from both a short story and a novel. Like, I wanted a novella, and I thought that's what the story that turned out to be the novel was. Presented it to my editor as a novella, and he said, "No, there's more here." And he was right. It needed more. The story required more, and that's the novel that comes out. But this was, it was a very different experience in that it didn't feel like there were parts that I had to put together. It didn't feel like none of it was written out of sequence. None of it was like needed to be soldered together the way sometimes parts of a novel do. This was just like, it almost felt like I was writing it as the reader would experience it, front to back. The revelations came, the characters developed, the story took shape, and then I was done. It was great.
I had we were just emailing about Pafko at the Wall, the Lillo, which is a novella, and obviously it's part of Underworld as well. I believe he wrote Pafko at the Wall first as a short. I don't remember the time. I believe he wrote that first, though. Yeah,
and they published it as a novella.
And then you
can still find copies of that floating around. It's neat. Yeah. But it's a perfect little on its own. It's perfect.
Exactly, and I that to me is my favorite baseball fiction writing, and I think that baseball in particular does lend itself to a novella. It's strange because you have these long games, these long pauses, but then I think that one of the traps about writing baseball fiction is trying to get everything about a game into writing fiction, whereas in a novella you can kind of almost like focus in on something.
Yeah, good
and
point.
I think that's why that works so well. And I think that it really falls apart when you try to get every single thing about baseball into a book. Because I watch baseball. I love baseball. I don't love every single thing about baseball. They're like, we don't need all of that. Sure. We really don't at all. I mean, it sounds like you just had the easiest time writing this.
Yeah, I do feel like a bit of a jerk trying to describe the writing process it's completely at odds with the rest of it, right? Like with the nonfiction stuff, so much research, and you get, I can get lost in the research, and in fact, the research becomes a way to forestall the actual writing. And with the the longer form, like even short stories, which I've published 2 books of short stories. They typically don't come to me as quickly or as complete as this one did. It was just the right confluence of circumstances, and I'm fortunate, and I know that. And there's a very good chance I go the rest of my writing life without something like this happening again. So I'm trying to enjoy it, but yeah, there's going to remain some mystery around just how it happened, because I don't really have all of the information, even though I was the only person involved.
When you were working on this, especially back in sort of the early phases, the research phases, was there anything that came to you that surprised you about the way that baseball has changed or hasn't changed in the last 130 years or so?
I think mostly the latter, how it hasn't changed, really. And that's always been part of its appeal to me, is it's sort of, it seems timeless. And there's definitely been changes in the game. There's no question about that. And I do recognize that a contemporary baseball fan might look at a game being played then or into the dead ball era and recognize it, but not necessarily appreciate it, because it doesn't rely on the same things that we are used to. But I think as I said, there wasn't a lot of direct research for this. It was the residue of research I'd done for other stuff. But in doing that, in going back to the old newspapers and the old accounts, it's kind of how fully formed the game was by then that really is interesting to me. And, the understanding of the things that we take for granted about, like, how you move a runner over, or when is the best time to throw the fastball, or, like that's all, it's been there for a century, which is amazing, more than a century. So, I kind of understood that, but it was nice to write about the game back then and recognize just how similar it remains.
Yeah. There really aren't a lot of things that we do almost the exact same way 100 years later. There are very few things in life,
we've typically found better ways to do things.
If anything, I think we almost found worse ways to do baseball. But
we unquestionably have. Yeah. But the bones of it remain, they still got good bones.
Definitely. After this experience, would you consider writing a full-length novel or another short story novella for baseball?
I wouldn't say no, because I've already learned that when I say no to something, there's a chance that I'll do it anyway. I don't know. There's a number of things I'm eager to get back to. I want to finish this nonfiction thing. I'm really looking forward to getting back to writing some short stories when time allows. There is an idea kicking around in my head about this story from another angle. I kind of want to know, for people who haven't read the book, much of the plot is driven by McCurdle's separation from the woman he's connected to, Maureen, who lives in a separate town, and they don't see each other much. And there's this promise that when he's done playing ball, that they'll be reunited, and that will be life. I'm curious about what she's doing when he's playing ball. So it would be less directly about baseball, but it would still unavoidably, bump up against that world. I don't know when and if that actually will happen, but I am interested in that. So it's back. The idea is back here, and there's a file open. There's a file open that's starting to accumulate notes.
No, I like that, because especially with baseball, and I suppose with anything, someone's dream is also affecting not just them. There's a lot of people that are involved in this goal, in this dream.
Yeah, I grew up in a military family. My dad was in the Navy, so I saw, the back end of it. Going from town to town and him being away for stretches of time and things like that. So I think that there's something applicable about that. I think it's similar.
Oh, definitely.
And as you say, every ball player's got this kind of superstructure of family and support around them, and we don't often give thought to.
That was Andrew Forbes, author of McCurdle's Arm. To close us out, we have Arlene Somerton Smith reading an excerpt from her short story, Hot Dogs Make Great Pillows, from our latest issue.
My name is Arlene Somerton Smith, and I'm reading from Hot Dog Buns Make Great Pillows, a short story that takes place during the first game played by the Montreal Expos in 1969 at Shea Stadium. It's about the unexpected birth of a baby girl who grows up to start a new professional women's baseball league. The mother, Jackie, is the daughter of Bobby, a former player in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. "Oh no," Bobby said. "It can't be, not now. It's only the first inning." "I know," Jackie said. When she tried to walk again, she only made it as far as a hot dog concession. "Can I help you?" A teenage boy greeted them. His spotless white apron still had creases in it. Jackie placed both hands on the counter and let her belly hang. "I think I need to push." "What?" Hot Dog Boy's mouth fell open. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," Bobby said. "This baby is coming. It feels like it's going to fall out." "Everyone says that, but for God's sake, you can't have a baby here." "I can't walk, and the baby's coming right now." All blood drained from Hot Dog Boy's face. He grabbed the hem of his apron and scrunched it into a ball. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." Following an instinct she didn't understand, Jackie squatted. "I've got to take off my underwear." "Oh my God," Hot Dog Boy said. "Not on the dirty floor," Bobby said. "Give that to me." She pointed to Hot Dog Boy's apron. He passed the loop over his head. "I just got it today. It's new." Bobby ignored him, spread the apron out, and helped her daughter to lie down. "My back is killing me," Jackie said. "I need something under me, anything." Hot Dog Boy grabbed the first thing his eyes landed on, packages of hot dog buns. Jackie fell back onto those soft cushions with relief. "Hot dog buns make great pillows," she said.
We talk to people in and around baseball literature every week on the podcast and publish around 50 writers every year in the Twin Bill Literary Journal. You can support us on Patreon. Until next time,